Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to our Entitled People series, where you'll hear ridiculous stories about people who believe they can do no wrong and should always get what they want. Guys, before we dive into today's stories, take a look at this. For my 16th birthday, I asked for a white Cadillac. My parents bought me a silver one, so I crashed it on purpose. What in the world, guys? I remember seeing this online, and she literally posted a week later with a brand new white Cadillac in her parents' garage, with a caption that said, "Should have gotten me a white one in the first place," shaking my head. Like, guys, I've seen kids throw tantrums because they got the wrong color iPhone but a wrong color car. What is going on? If this were my kid, they'd be taking the bus until they could afford their own car. My friends, if you think that's entitled, wait until you hear the stories in this episode. The first story is about a mom who tries to force her daughter to be a Karen. The second story features a Karen harassing someone because she's pregnant. And we'll finish up with an entitled dad who loves to tell his kids how much they can eat. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today, and do hit that subscribe button for future stories. This is a story about my own mother, and yep, she's the Karen. I'm a young lady with a rather large chest. I'm an E in my country, which I think is a double D in the USA. Because of that, if I'm leaving the house, bras are mandatory. About 2 years ago, when I was 19, I bought the most comfortable bra I'd ever owned. I only had that bra for about 3 months until the underwire broke free and started to stab me. It happened at university, and when I got home that afternoon, I told my mother all about it. The bra cost $60 and was only 3 months old, so maybe it was just defective. I was going to go to the store and ask for an exchange or refund, but the only thing was, I didn't have a receipt. I take good care of my bras, so I didn't think to keep the receipt. I told this to my mom and wondered what I should do. My mother started and said, "Well, that's not okay. You know what to do, right? Let them know that it's illegal for them to sell faulty products. Do not leave the store until you have that refund. If the cashier says they can't refund it without a receipt, then ask to speak to the manager. They will sort you out." Now, my mother has never worked in retail herself, but at this point, I had been in retail for about 4 or 5 years. I know the annoyance of the phrase, "Can I speak to your manager?" and was not about to enforce it on an innocent civilian. I told her, "No, I'm not going to do that. That would just be rude." She said, "Well, I could do it for you then. I'll just say my daughter bought a defective bra, which is illegal to sell, and we demand a refund because, according to the law," I cut her off. "No, we're not doing that either. It's not the cashier's fault that one bra happens to be defective, so I'm not going to treat them as if it is. I'll just go in, explain my situation, and ask what their policy is about refunds without a receipt." So, you know what, ladies and gentlemen? That's exactly what I did. I walked in, found the cashier, and explained that my $60 bra broke in 3 months, and I didn't have the receipt, in the friendliest and kindest way possible, because I know how much working in retail can be tough. The lady said that she did need some proof of purchase and asked me what day I bought it on. She was so kind and lovely as well. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and looked at the transactions from 3 months ago. I found the date of the exact $60 purchase, gave her the date, and she typed it into her computer. She found a transaction on that date for $60 for the exact bra, color and size too. She printed that off, scanned it, and refunded the original purchase. I thanked both ladies for their amazing help and walked out of the store with my new, non-defective bra. See, Mom? You can have a social interaction without belittling retail staff and acting like a know-it-all or, heaven forbid, demanding to speak to the manager. Just be kind, my friends. Take a lesson from this person here. There's no need to raise your voice and get demanding in stores to get what you want, people. You end up looking foolish, creating a scene, and a lot of the time, you leave with nothing but wasted energy. If you're kind to retail staff, they will do their best to help you. Getting angry doesn't solve anything. Karens, I have no idea why I read this story first, because this next story? A Karen is relentless. Next story. I'm a cocktail waitress and I'm 7 months pregnant. Obviously, I don't drink while I'm pregnant or drink on the job ever. So, a woman, the Karen, comes in with what I'm assuming was her husband, son, and daughter, and they're seated for lunch. We're not really a restaurant, but we do have a small appetizer menu with sandwiches, wings, and stuff. I give them the menus, and Karen says, "But wait, do you work here?" I told her, "Yep," and she says, "But you're pregnant. You can't work here if you're pregnant." I told her, "I work here, I don't drink here." I tried to say it with a laugh, keeping the mood light. The woman looks over and says, "Have you taken any prenatal courses? Do you really think that's responsible to have your unborn baby in here? That's where I made an error." I get defensive about anyone asserting that I'm a bad mother, obviously, so I said, "Well, you've brought your kids in here." Karen responds, "Yes, and what kind of example do you think you're setting for them?" I'm still collecting my thoughts at this point when they grunt and wave me away. I figure I can kiss my tip goodbye, but hopefully that'll be the end of the discussion. I see them flagging down the bartender after a few minutes, and I figure they're ready, so I go over. Karen asks to speak to a manager. Now, they haven't even gotten their drinks yet, so nothing above my abilities could really be wrong yet. I ask if there's anything I can help them with, and her husband, Mr. Karen, says really sternly, "No, just a manager." "Didn't you hear my wife? This place is too small for a manager. It's just servers, bartenders, and 2 CO owners. The one who's working in the back on a phone call will be upset if I bother her." I realize they're probably still uncomfortable with me being pregnant, so I say, "Maybe Ella can help." Ella's the other server, but Karen just gets up to physically look for the manager. I admit defeat and go back to drag the owner off her call. The owner tries not to let on how mad she is about being disrupted, and goes over with a big smile to ask if there's anything she can help them with. Karen informs her, as though it's urgent breaking news, "Your server is pregnant!" The owner says she's aware and asks if they prefer a different server. Karen says, No, she can't be a drink server if she's pregnant. That's child abuse." The owner says, "I assure you, none of our employees drink on the clock, especially not our pregnant ones. If you'd prefer, I can have Ella serve you." Mr. Karen says, "I don't want my kids seeing this. Maybe I'm missing something, but seeing what exactly?" He responds, talking really slowly and condescendingly, "A pregnant woman around all this alcohol." I told him, "I don't know what you're insinuating, but I would never drink during pregnancy." Karen then responds, "Look, honey, didn't you take a health class in junior high? With a drink right under you half the time, alcohol vapor is absorbed into your blood through the air, and then that blood goes to the fetus and poisons it." The owner and I exchange a look and realize we will not get anywhere with her. The owner says, "So we can have Ella serve you, or I'm afraid there's not much else we can do." Mr. Karen says, "We're not leaving until she's placed on maternity leave, or better yet, fired." Karen chimes in, getting crocodile tears, and says, "You may not think that a fetus is a child, but I was taught to believe life begins at conception, and I will stand up for all living things, big and small, because that's what my Lord and Savior wants me to do." The entire time she's delivering this tearful speech, she's looking around, expecting others to, join her or applaud. She continues and says, "Jesus is love, and Jesus said this is not okay, just because you think it's okay to abuse a child if it's small enough." The owner responds, "I don't need anyone to tell me what Jesus said. If there was abuse here, I would have acted to stop it, but there isn't any. I need you to please leave." Karen then says, "I'm calling the police." The owner tells her to go ahead and do that. As we all wait for the cops to arrive, Karen keeps trying to give her sermon, and eventually everybody yells at her until she quiets down. Enter Officers 1 and 2. Officer 1 says, "Yeah, we received a call. Is there a Mr. Karen here somewhere?" Mr. Karen says, "Right here, officers." The officer asks, "Are the parties involved still in the bar?" They point me out. I pretend not to notice because I'm worried the officers will take them outside and I won't be able to watch any more fireworks. Officer 2 asks exactly what's going on. Karen says, "That woman was drinking. She's pregnant. You can clearly see that she's very pregnant." Before I can go over and tell them she's lying about my drinking, the officers look at each other and back at the Karen family. Officer 2 says, "That's not illegal." Karen responds, "What?" He continues, "It's definitely not recommended, but it's not illegal. Now, do you know the woman? Is she a friend of yours? Is she family?" Karen says, "She works here in a bar, and she's pregnant." Karen's husband then says he wants to see the place's liquor license revoked. Officer 2 says, "Listen, she isn't doing anything illegal. What I can do is talk to her, but we can't take any action beyond that. Is there anything else you observed that you'd like to report?" The second officer comes over to me and takes me to a quiet spot, while the first is getting their personal information and taking the rest of the statement. Both awesome officers then go talk to the owner, who says she was just about to call them herself on account of the trespassing, but the sirens outside are bad for business, and she was hoping the Karens would eventually leave on their own. The officers tell the Karen party that they need to leave. Mr. Karen says, "This is a public place. I have every right to be here if I want." Officer 1 tells him, "No, sir, this is a private business and the business owners have asked you to leave. It sounds like more than once, but at least once since we've been here." Karen then says, "This is a disgrace. This is an affront to scripture and to child safety." Officer 2 chimes in and says, "I understand you're upset. Let's talk about it outside." He places a hand on Mr. Karen and gives him a firm look. Now, the next part was sad. As Mr. Karen walks out backwards so he can keep yelling at us, bumping into things every step of the way, he says, "I will be contacting the authorities about your liquor license. I happen to be close and personal friends with the mayor, and you two, I want badge numbers. Don't think we're done here because we haven't even started." They did make a complaint to the liquor authority claiming, among other things, that we served minors. We were investigated, but obviously it came up fine. My boss asked me to hold off sharing the story with anyone until the matter was settled, but now it is, so I had to share, and I'm still laughing about it. Guys, that story was absolutely ridiculous. Where in the world did Karen get her education? Alcohol vapors can get inhaled and then enter your bloodstream and be harmful to a fetus? What? And she even had the nerve to ask her if she paid attention in class. Oh my goodness, that's not true, right? Because if it is, I'm about to get roasted. Next story. My dad has severe control issues around food. He must always eat more or have a bigger portion than everybody else. Sometimes he takes smaller portions to be self-righteous, but then goes and eats a second meal or course that nobody else is allowed to eat. He's also tried to say when you should stop eating, which always has to be before him, even if he's already eaten and you haven't. There's nothing worse than when you've skipped lunch and you find out that dad had a big afternoon snack because that means dinner is going to be rough. His controlling behavior has given me food issues where I hoard food and binge because I'm scared he's going to take my food away. I've recently moved out, and one of the big perks is I have a healthier relationship with food. I binge less, and I eat less in general, but mostly I'm not consumed by thoughts of food 24/7 like I used to be. This Christmas was actually the first Christmas I did not binge on chocolate before and after dinner, so enter my dad. He called at my home today to fix my sink. As he was leaving, he sat me down and went through all the food I ate at Christmas and told me how much less of each item I should have eaten. I tell him he needs to stop controlling my food, as it'll trigger me for a binging episode. He continues, and I explain again. He tells me binging is only hurting me, and I tell him I know, but he needs to stop. I also mentioned how creepy it is for him to watch me eat and count what I eat during Christmas. He tells me that it's his right as my father, and any time we have meals together, he's going to be watching and counting. Other things he's done? 1. He's looked through my trash to see what I'm eating in my own home that he does not live in. 2. He questions what I eat every day. 3. He's offered to order my groceries online for me so I don't have to go out to shop during COVID. He then edited my shopping list to meet his standards. That dad definitely has the need to feel like he's the alpha all the time. Telling your kid how much they can eat, when they can eat, and when they should stop eating is definitely something that is really, really messed up. I don't even know if that's entitled. That's more like abuse, if anything. Next story. This takes place in my hometown. A house had been built right next to ours over the course of the past year and a half, and a small family moved into it. We never met the family, as we're usually not the ones to go out of our way to meet people. So, it came as a huge surprise when this happened. We have a private backyard surrounded by a fence with a locking gate. Karen's house had a deck that overlooked our backyard. Midwinter, our dryer decided to die, and we had to take all of our clothes to the closest laundromat to dry at least once a week. Once spring rolled around, I decided to put a clothesline in our backyard to help save money. A few weeks went by, and at least once a week, I would be out there hanging loads of laundry to dry. On one such occasion, our neighbor, the entitled mother, was on her deck talking on her phone. I paid her no mind and just hung my clothes to dry. As I headed back inside, I heard a dreaded banshee screech. That was the entitled mother. She said, "Hey boy." Now, I'm a woman, but I have my hair cut short with most of it buzzed, so I can see why she assumed I was a boy. I looked over, mostly because of the noise she made, not because I thought she was talking to me. But unfortunately she was, and she said, "You can't hang those out here. You can't just hang your filthy underwear out here where I have to look at them. What if my kids see? Are you some kind of sicko?" I told her, "Lady, it's my backyard. If I want to hang my laundry to dry in my backyard, I can." With that, I gave her a gesture to kindly mind her own business and went inside. About 30 minutes later, I heard a knock on my door. When I answered it, there was a police officer standing there. He said, "Good afternoon, ma'am. We received a call about a person in this residence trying to flash minors. "Would you happen to know anything about this?" I replied, seriously. "That lady was just screaming at me for hanging my underwear on my clothesline. I assure you nothing else is happening." The officer asked if he could take a look, and I said of course. I showed the officer my clothesline, and we could clearly see the mother glaring at us with a smug look on her face from her deck. The officer thanked me, went to speak to the mother, and that was that. What a great first impression that OP's neighbor made. Let's just complain about clothes hanging to dry outside and then call the police to lie about OP to get her in trouble. What happened to being nice and bringing over a pie, guys? So, the next story I have for you is a long one, but it's also a really satisfying one where OP gets a little mini revenge on a Karen and her husband. Next story. In my senior year of high school, I was taking a plane to visit my grandma. The flight went from Baltimore to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh to Vegas, then Vegas to Boise. The flight from Baltimore was almost empty, and I was on Southwest, so I could choose my own seat. I was on the same plane until Vegas. I selected the last row of the plane by the window, put my earbuds in, and took a nap until Pittsburgh. When the plane landed, I went to the bathroom while people were getting onto the plane. To save my spot, I left my backpack in my seat and put my jacket on the seat. When I got back, I noticed that this pregnant lady, Karen, was sitting in my seat and her husband was sitting in the aisle seat. They had thrown my jacket on the ground in the aisle with my backpack underneath, which had a laptop in it. Kind of annoyed, I pointed out that I was previously sitting in the window seat and asked if I could have my seat back. Karen said, "Can't you see that I'm pregnant, and I need this seat?" She said that quite aggressively. I then looked at the husband and asked if he could please scoot over to sit next to his wife. This guy looked me in the eyes and said, "Sorry, but we're allowed to choose our own seats, and I choose the aisle seat." Being a high school senior, I wasn't that big of a guy, but I was still not happy to be sitting in the center seat. Realizing this was a losing argument and I wasn't going to get any leverage over this lady, I decided to grit my teeth and bear it. I collected my stuff and moved into the middle seat. The second I sat down, the lady said, "You can't have your backpack in your seat. You're going to have to find a place to put it." I told her I'm just going to put it under my seat. She responded, "Where am I going to put my feet then?" I said, "I don't know, not under my seat," and then I muttered, "Ugh, jerk." Suddenly, I felt someone grabbing my collar. The husband pulled me inches from his face and said, "Don't use that language to my wife or the baby. Now say you're sorry." I was shocked. Not only was this guy grabbing me in public, but at the time, I was only 17 and still considered a minor. Not wanting to make a big deal out of this, I gave the most half-hearted "I'm sorry" to the woman and put my earbuds in as the flight was getting ready to take off. While taxiing, the lady kept trying to get my attention by yelling in my ear and snapping her fingers inches from my face before she finally pulled my earbuds out. She said, "You need to turn your electronics off during takeoff." In a rage, she spammed the flight attendant button. The flight attendant ran over and asked what was wrong, expecting an emergency. She said, "He won't turn off his electronics before the flight. He doesn't care about our lives." Realizing everybody was staring at us, when the flight attendant asked me to turn it off, I obliged. After I turned it off, she started to lecture me about how she was right and I was wrong, rubbing in how the flight attendant proved her right. So, the flight is in the air, and when the intercom announced we could use electronics, I put my earbuds in and cranked the volume. About 5 minutes into the flight, I felt aggravated tapping on my shoulder. I turned and looked at the woman and she said, "You need to turn that down. It's bad for my baby." While I was listening to music louder than normal, it still wasn't to the point that an unborn baby would be able to hear it and be affected. Shocked, I responded with, "No, but the second she reached for the flight attendant button, I said I would. I did that trick where you turn your volume down twice and then up once, so it looks like you turned it down 3 times, and I asked, 'Better?' She responded, 'More,' so I went down 1 more. Before I could put my earbuds back in, she said, 'It's proper etiquette to talk to the people you're sitting next to.' I just ignored her. So I sat back and tried to close my eyes, and amazingly, this worked. I fell asleep for about an hour. It's a 5-hour flight. When I woke up, this woman had her foot on my backpack with my laptop in it, so I adjusted my foot to make it uncomfortable for her to keep her feet the way they were. She immediately stood up, and I thought she was going to yell, given her tendency to overreact. But it turned out she was just getting up to use the bathroom. She got past me and her husband when a brilliant idea popped into my head. The second she stepped into the bathroom, I got ready to get up and move my stuff over to the window seat. As I grabbed my backpack and shifted my momentum, I felt a hand grab me. I hadn't taken into account the husband. He said, "You are not taking my wife's seat." I told him, "Sir, I have to warn you that you're grabbing a minor, and if I feel like it at any second I could cry that you're attacking me." He let go, and I moved over to the seat I had before. When she got back, she was furious, demanding that I move seats, to the point where the flight attendant came over to see what was going on. This time, she sided with me. The woman sat in the middle seat, absolutely fuming. Thankfully, I moved seats because she was up and down in her seat, having to go to the bathroom every 15 minutes. That was pretty much the rest of the flight, except how she intercepted my bag of pretzels when the drink cart came. I responded by closing the shade to the window as we started to land at the Las Vegas airport. Once off the plane, I went to Burger King to get a drink and some food. Then I got to my next gate and found the last seat. I scarfed down my fries and burger and walked across the hall, literally 10 feet away from my seat, to throw away my garbage. When I turned back to go to my seat, I saw the same lady now sitting in my seat that I had my bag in. She had moved it to the floor in front of her. She then shot me a smug grin, thinking she had won. Somewhat defeated by losing 2 seats to the lady, losing sleep and losing my patience, I figured it was time for action. I went over to her to gather my things, and as I got to her, I looked her dead in the eyes. I raised my right hand with my fingers spread and hovered it right over her stomach. I looked down at my hand and then back to her eyes and said, "I just cursed your baby." I turned around 180 degrees to walk across the hall and sat down on the floor, staring at her intensely. Now, I don't believe in curses, nor do I think I have the ability to place a curse, but this lady believed it. Her face was left expressionless, and she just started weeping to herself as I sat and watched. When her husband came to see what was wrong, and she told him, he instantly stormed over to me, knocked the drink out of my hand, grabbed me by the collar, and got right in my face. He said, "Listen here, you little punk," and that was all he got out before security guards grabbed the man and detained him. One guard asked me why this guy was angry, and I said that his wife had taken my seat, and I made a comment under my breath, and he got upset with me. The officer asked for my name and identification, saw that I was a minor, and asked if I wanted to press charges. I told him yes, but I also didn't want to miss my flight. So, he understood and let me go. Then informed the Southwest airline attendant to please keep track of me, just in case they needed more information. This meant that I got to board early and chose the first seat I could, the aisle seat, to see if this lady would get on the plane, but she never got on the plane, and it took off. Halfway through the flight attendant asked me if I put a curse on the baby. I responded with, "I don't know magic." 20 minutes later, the flight attendant told me that they missed their flight and would have to buy a new ticket to their final destination with another airline. So, with 5 words, I cost this horrible woman and her husband around $500. I absolutely love this story. To think that the entitled woman almost got away with it until OP's incredible mind and quick thinking cursed her unborn baby. What in the world? I am totally going to use that one day. I'm just going to start jokingly hexing Karens whenever they tick me off. Heading on to our last story, an entitled family thinks they own an entire beach, my friends, which is absolutely ridiculous because I own beaches. I own them all. Next story. Quick backstory, my family and family friends own beach houses in a little bay that eventually leads out to the ocean. There are several small piers within the boardwalk area where families can swim and jump off the piers. They have netting surrounding the pier to indicate how far families can swim. Beyond the netting, that's where boats, kayaks, and such operate. Unfortunately, on these piers, there have been some entitled people believing that they own some of the piers because their beach house is right behind it. I will admit, our family has had our beach house for over a century, passed down through several generations. Even though we have to walk down the street to get to this pier, I think if anybody deserves this pier, it should be us. Anyway, on to the story. This happened to my neighbor, who eventually told my family friend what happened. After swimming hours were over at the pier, families like to go there to catch crabs. Because of the whole social distancing thing, my neighbor and their daughter went to try to find a good spot away from other families so they could crab. They actually got a really good spot at the end of the pier away from everybody else, and they set up their things there. They were only planning on catching a few crabs and then heading out. It was only a few minutes into crabbing when a 15 or 16-year-old kid came marching right over to my neighbor and their daughter and said, "Hey, you're in my spot." My neighbor looked around, trying to find anything to show that the kid's spot was taken. Nets, cages, buckets, anything. And there wasn't any. They were the only ones there. Everybody else was on the other side of the pier. My neighbor said, "I'm sorry, but there's nothing here to show that this is your spot." The kid said, "You need to leave now, that's my spot." My neighbor told the kid, "This is public property and nothing here is yours. We're only going to catch a few crabs and then leave. Just please be patient." The kid continued to whine for a couple of minutes before finally leaving. My neighbor couldn't believe how immature this kid was acting. Their daughter was only 10 and acting even more mature than he was. Not even a few minutes later, the kid came back. And who did he come with? The entitled mother, who was a full-on Karen. She said, "Excuse me, I heard you two made fun of my son and won't let him have his spot back." My neighbor told her, "We never insulted him, and there's nothing here to show that this is his spot. We're only here to catch a few crabs and then we'll head out." She said, "No, you need to leave his spot now." My neighbor told the lady, "We're not going anywhere," and she, pointing to a house, said, "You see that? That's our house right there. My son has claimed this spot on the pier as his own. You must obey, or I will tell the authorities." My neighbor told her again, "There's nothing marked on this pier that states this is your son's. This pier and the entire beach and boardwalk are public property. I myself can call the authorities on you for disturbing us." So, it looked like my neighbor had finally put the entitled mother and her kid in a corner. My neighbor's daughter, completely oblivious to the argument and focusing on crabbing, pulled out a small crab from her net and showed it to my neighbor. Before they could say anything, though, the entitled mother quickly butted in and said, "Give us that crab you just caught. It'll make up for all the trouble you caused." My neighbor told her, "It's too small to be kept." The mother said, "Who told you that? It's an actual law here." My neighbor responded, "There's nothing here to prove that," and then pointed to a sign on a pole directly behind them explaining the rules of catching crabs. My neighbor then told her, "If you own this pier like you claim you do, you would have known that." The mother did not say anything, but she tried to snatch the small crab out of my neighbor's daughter's net. Thankfully, before the entitled mother got to her, the small crab let go and plopped back into the water. The mother let out an ungodly howl at the sight, as if she had just watched her precious kid get attacked by a shark or something. Finally, she grabbed her kid and stormed away from them. My neighbor and their daughter did not stay too long after that, and they didn't catch any crabs. They both just wanted to get the heck out of there after that. Ah, entitlement logic at its finest. Look at our house. It's right there. We live right there, so we own the whole pier and boardwalk. What? These stories are a wild mix of entitlement and clever retaliation, and I'm all for the satisfying comebacks. The bra refund story is refreshing. I've worked retail, and my mom can be a bit of a Karen too, so I relate to OP's restraint. Her calm approach, finding the transaction on her banking app, and getting a new bra without drama, proves kindness works. It's a lesson in handling issues without turning into a demanding jerk. The pregnant waitress story infuriates me. Karen's obsession with OP's pregnancy and baseless alcohol vapor claims are absurd. I've faced judgmental strangers, and her sanctimonious sermon about child abuse is laughable. The owner's firm response and the police shutting her down? Perfect. The liquor license complaint falling flat is the cherry on top. Karens need to mind their own business. The food control story hits hard. I've struggled with food issues, and the dad's obsessive monitoring, checking trash, editing grocery lists, is controlling and abusive. OP's courage to confront him and reclaim her relationship with food is inspiring. It's not just entitlement, it's toxic. I hope she continues healing. The clothesline saga is ridiculous. Karen's outrage over underwear and calling the police for flashing is unhinged. I've had nosy neighbors, and OP's calm explanation to the officer was spot on. The smug glare from Karen's deck? She deserved to be ignored. Be a normal neighbor, not a vigilante. The flight seat story is epic. Karen's seat stealing and her husband's aggression are infuriating. As a frequent flyer, I'd lose it if someone tossed my stuff. OP's fake curse was a brilliant petty jab, costing them a missed flight and $500. The husband's detainment? Sweet justice. The beach pier story screams entitlement. Claiming a public pier is theirs because of a nearby house is delusional. The mom's attempt to snatch a crab in her tantrum when it escaped? Pathetic. OP's neighbor standing firm with the rule sign was perfect. These stories show how staying cool and clever trumps entitlement every time. And that brings us to another end of our Entitled People series. My friends, we survived! If you missed the last episode of Entitled People, check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you!